What Cardinal Dolan may not have known is that many of Kirk's words were marked as racist, homophobic, transphobic, and anti-immigrant rhetoric. These prejudicial words do not reflect the qualities of a saint. These are words that sound as if the sisters were influenced by outside forces and clearly didn't do their own research. Welcome to the Father Leo Show, where I'm dishing out faith, culture, and commentary. In this episode, we're going to discuss an online debate between Cardinal Dolan, the Archbishop of New York, and some Sisters of Charity, who are the nuns inspired by the inspiration of St. Elizabeth Ann Seton. And what were they debating? Whether or not Charlie Kirk was a good example. And so we're going to jump right into it now. But before we do, please make sure you like, subscribe, share, and comment. I do get comments and emails from people that even if they have subscribed, it's not easy for them to get notifications. And so your engagement, whether you like, subscribe, share, and comment, it does help us overcome algorithms that suppress good Catholic, balanced, pastoral content, as well as being able to do shows like this in real time. Basically means that we're not just filming a bunch of episodes in advance and hoping people watch. No, we're trying to respond to the things that people are talking about in real time without being reactionary. And the only way we can do that is with your support. Go to patreon.com/The Father Leo Show. You can go to platinggrace.com and learn about everything we do, but in order to support this particular channel, please go to patreon.com/The Father Leo Show. You can join at any level, but if you do support us monthly, then you get access to some good content and also some special perks. So let's just jump right into it now and ask ourselves, what does the Cardinal say about Charlie Kirk? And what do the Sisters of Charity or the Daughters of Charity say about this man? Well, let's just jump right into it with my commentary on Kirk and Christianity. I recently returned from a long pilgrimage on the Danube River. It was a Danube River cruise. By the way, if you want to join me in any of my trips that are coming up next year, I've got some great trips. All you've got to do is go to platinggrace.com/travel and you'll see all of the trip options, and we have a few more coming up as well. But the reason why I'm talking about the Danube River is because you would see things like Kirk, and Kirk means Kirk, and Kirk means church. So Charlie Kirk is truly Charlie of the church, Charles of the church. And he really was public about his faith in Jesus Christ. His approach made many people feel, not many, but at least a loud number of people feel like he wasn't a good representative of Christianity. But listen to what Cardinal Dolan has to say about Charlie Kirk and the terrible, tragic assassination that he endured and what his family, sadly, will continue to replay in their heads because they love and miss this man. But here's what Dolan has to say on Charlie Kirk.
So when I heard the tragic news, I said, oh, I wonder who he was. And then all of a sudden, this overwhelming sense of sorrow and kind of renewal. And I thought, I got to learn about this guy. And the more I learned about him, I thought, this guy's a modern-day St. Paul. He was a missionary. He's an evangelist. He's a hero. He's one, I think, that knew what Jesus meant when he said, the truth will set you free. And to do it, now, I understand he was pretty blunt and he was pretty direct. He didn't try to avoid any controversy. He didn't even try to avoid confrontation. The difference is the way, the mode, the style that he did it. Always with respect. And not only was that a gracious, kind of virtuous thing to do, it's effective. Because when your opponents see, this guy kind of respects me. We kind of disagree here, but he kind of enjoys me. And he's thanking me for being here. And he's telling me he appreciates the trust I have in him in sharing my views. I thought, this guy can teach us something. I've been spending the last week reading about him. And so last night, I was at NYU Catholic Student Center, about 200 students there. This is what they talked about. Wow. This is what they talked about.
That's exactly what people are talking about. Now, that was last week when the news was just kind of hitting the Catholic Church. Sadly, news hits the Catholic Church a little bit later than normal. And again, when George Floyd died, the USCCB put out an immediate statement denouncing the actions of the unfortunate and untimely death of George Floyd, which many people still think was caused by Derek Chauvin putting his knee on the man's neck, but it was really, to try to subdue him because he was erratic. They don't realize that he was also on 5 times, I think, the level of fentanyl in his bloodstream. And he was not a martyr for any faith. But I remember the USCCB putting out a statement on him immediately. When Charlie Kirk dies, who was an international figure, people said nothing. Only a few bishops actually said anything, including Cardinal Dolan, who has my deepest respect in many ways. He was the rector for me at the North American College in Rome. He's obviously a best-selling author, an incredible speaker, but he's also a holy and balanced, faithful man. You can't call him a right-winger. You can't call him a leftist, liberal. You can't call him any of that. He's just a good and faithful man. And what's interesting is that as keyed in to the events of the world as Cardinal Dolan is, he actually didn't know who Charlie Kirk was. Now, this is very important. In order to get the gist of this episode, you're going to have to know that Charlie Kirk was not well known by many people in the Catholic Church, at least the higher ups. On a ground level, many people, parishioners, knew of Charlie Kirk. In fact, Charlie Kirk is the reason what brought them back to the Catholic Church. Interesting. And we are probably going to have that discussion about whether or not Charlie Kirk would have become Catholic. Let me know in the comments if you think that that would be a good episode. But it's interesting that Cardinal Dolan was not familiar with Charlie Kirk, and only when he died did he do a deep dive down the rabbit hole without any biases from other people telling him that he was evil or he was great. Cardinal Dolan didn't know much about him. Did his own research, which is key. He didn't know about him, and he did his own research. Are you starting to get where I'm going here? Didn't know him, wasn't biased, did his own research. And he kind of concludes that Charlie Kirk could have been considered, before Catholicism was an actually named, understood church. At one point, it was just Christian, believer of the new way. Even in the Holy Land now, the difference between Catholicism, Greek Orthodox, the Coptics, Protestants, they have a much better relationship with each other. Yeah, there's some friction, that's more cultural, but it's not necessarily always theological. They are just lumped together as Christians. So prior to the establishment or the understanding of the Catholic Church as we know it today, at one point they were all Christians. So Charlie Kirk was compared to, by Cardinal Dolan, a modern-day St. Paul, a preacher to the Gentiles, a preacher to all nations. And as St. Paul confronted many people who didn't like him, which is the reason why St. Paul was brutally treated, terribly mistreated, abused, imprisoned. There were death threats against him, and he eventually died getting beheaded. Beheaded. Real interesting comparison that Cardinal Dolan is making. Just saying, it's interesting. And I might even agree with that assessment because I am not biased by what people are telling me about him, and I do my own research. Sadly, however, there has been some online debate. And as a result, there have been people who are speaking out against Charlie Kirk, including, sadly, a group of nuns. And this is what these nuns have to say. Sisters of Charity of New York respond to Cardinal Dolan's remarks on Charlie Kirk. Several of us watched Cardinal Dolan's recent Fox interview where he referred to Charlie Kirk as, quote, a modern-day St. Paul, unquote. The Cardinal praised Mr. Kirk's conviction and willingness to speak about the Lord and for being a model for young people looking for meaning in their lives. We grieve every loss of life and unequivocally condemn the killing of Mr. Kirk. What Cardinal Dolan may not have known is that many of Kirk's words were marked as racist, homophobic, transphobic, and anti-immigrant rhetoric by violent pro-gun advocacy and by the promotion of Christian nationalism. These prejudicial words do not reflect the qualities of a saint. To compare Mr. Kirk to St. Paul risks confusing the true witness of the gospel and giving undue sanction to words and actions that hurt the very people Jesus calls us to love. Last week, Cardinal Dolan joined us in celebrating 50th anniversary of the canonization of our foundress, St. Elizabeth Ann Seton. Elizabeth's legacy is not one of exclusion or hatred, but of radical welcome, tireless service, and unwavering love of neighbor. Many of Kirk's words stand in stark contrast to the charity and compassion that defined those of Elizabeth Seton. For generations, the Sisters of Charity of New York have cared for immigrant families arriving with nothing but hope. While our direct service has changed, our commitment to those families endures. They deserve true examples of discipleship, not false prophets. In this moment, we reaffirm our mission to walk with all people who are poor and marginalized, to welcome immigrants and refugees, to defend the dignity of LGBTQ plus persons, and to labor for peace in a world saturated with violence. These are the marks of authentic discipleship. These are the qualities of saints. We urge the church leadership, including Cardinal Dolan, to lift up witnesses whose lives truly reflect the gospel of Christ, of Jesus Christ, lives of humility, justice, compassion, and peace. We will continue to pray for Mr. Kirk and his family and all who mourn his loss. And it's signed the leadership team, Sisters of Charity of New York, Sister Donna Dodge, Sister Margaret O'Brien, Sister Mary McCormick, Sister Marianne Daly, Sister Sheila Brosnan, and Sister Margaret Egan on the 24th of September, 2025. And so there you have it. You have an idea of nuns basically saying that Cardinal Dolan was wrong because some of Kirk's words were deemed by who, the sisters don't say, but they are deemed or considered to be transphobic. All of those things that we constantly hear about, generally from people on the left. Transphobic, racist, bigoted, homophobic, misogynistic, anti-immigrant. So these are words that sound as if the sisters were influenced by outside forces and clearly didn't do their own research. Why is that? Because this again sounds like the stuff of what politicians say, including politicians like AOC. And by the way, when I actually play these clips, I want you to know that I am not trying to be political or divisive. I get accused that, and it's just false. Why is playing a clip that someone is saying divisive? We're just hearing what they have to say because according to AOC, she is actually a Catholic. She might not be practicing her faith anymore, but apparently she is Christian. Or Catholic, perhaps, and this is what she has to say. But I also am interested in the follow-up commentary, by, guess what? A black man. Check this out.
We should be clear about who Charlie Kirk was. A man who believed that the Civil Rights Act that granted Black Americans the right to vote was a mistake. His rhetoric and beliefs were ignorant, uneducated, and sought to disenfranchise millions.
If you're going to call someone else's rhetoric ignorant, shouldn't you make sure your rhetoric isn't ignorant? The Civil Rights Act didn't give Black Americans the right to vote. The 15th Amendment did that a century earlier. Then, the Voting Rights Act in 1965 removed the barriers that states were still using to block Black people. But here's the deeper problem. AOC is attacking a straw man. Straw manning is when you twist someone's argument into a weaker version, then attack that instead of what they actually said. It's a logical fallacy. And it's what caused people to think Charlie Kirk is a racist. Here was his actual point.
You said the Civil Rights Act was a mistake. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, so the parts of the Civil Rights Act were great, but the way it's now being implemented to force men in female bathrooms to push forward of the trans agenda, the intent of the Civil Rights Act is way beyond what it was originally authored for.
But the intent specifically originally was to...
Well, that's interesting. So the intent and the law are two different things. So the intent was noble, which was to say that no American can be not allowed into a place of business based on the color of their skin or their ethnic heritage. Totally agreement with that. That's not what the law only did. It created a massive anti-racist DEI army that then gave us affirmative action.
I could do this all day because Charlie made this argument many times. Charlie supported the Civil Rights Act's intention to protect Black Americans from discrimination. His argument was that the law left loopholes, which are now being twisted to justify men and women's sports or racial discrimination in college admissions. AOC didn't just push this straw man once. She repeated it in emails. She pushed it on social media. And she was online when she sent those. 30 seconds with AI could have told her the context. All she had to do was ask, I heard Charlie said X. What's the context? Or what are the strongest arguments for and against this claim? That's how you steel man an argument. That's how you avoid straw manning. You can disagree with Charlie without misrepresenting the past. Lies got him killed. And if this doesn't stop, he won't be the last.
That's a very impressive man who debunked everything that AOC had to say based on logic. In other words, the straw man argument, which is a logical fallacy, which a lot of people are not familiar with, and I can honestly say that the sisters' comments almost represent a logical fallacy because they represent a twisting of the words the way AOC twisted the words of Charlie Kirk. And at the end of this show, I'm going to show you clip after clip, and I could gather a ton of them, that kind of disprove everything that these sisters claim about Charlie Kirk. However, there are still many other people in this world, in our world, including religious people who are truly brainwashed, for lack of a better term, which limits their ability to critically think. But they sound really nice. Even this one person who claims a priesthood as a U.S. Catholic priest, which is not Roman Catholic, so even though I might recognize his baptism as a priestly person, he has no legitimacy whatsoever to claim the term Catholic priest. This is a man who, again, I don't know him, but he comes across my feed quite a bit, and he represents the U.S. Catholic Priest Organization, and he looks like a normal Catholic priest, and he even kind of talks like a typical parish priest. But what he has to say is unequivocally not Catholic. Very misleading, and maybe I would even say deceptive to the point of evil.
In his letter to the Galatians, St. Paul writes, "There is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, nor is there male and female, for all are one in Christ Jesus." So it's hard to understand what Cardinal Dolan was thinking when he compared a pundit who made his living through incendiary comments to large audiences to St. Paul. I don't think the guy ever even made a tent. If there were a need for evidence to prove that there is polarity within the body of Christ, events of the past week would suffice. If Cardinal Dolan didn't canonize this apostle of division, much of the nation certainly did. Please, look at his statements about racial characteristics, women, diversity, inclusiveness, gun violence, immigration, religion, sexual differences. Do any of these seem in line with anything Paul taught? They certainly are not in line with any of the teachings of Jesus.
This is a group of Association of U.S. Catholic Priests. This particular view had over 500,000 likes. Doesn't he sound like a priest, like a pastor? Doesn't he look like a grandfatherly pastor figure? But his words are incredibly inaccurate. But he just failed to recognize that St. Paul is accused of being misogynist as well, because he speaks about women being subject to men having authority over women. He talks about that. It talks about how women should dress. So guess what? Charlie Kirk is very much like a St. Paul figure. And I guess what I can't stand about all of this is how many people aren't willing to actually do their own research. And the sisters' comments, which made a public debate against Cardinal Dolan, one of the highest ranking Catholic officials in the United States, very influential man and a very good and holy man. Now, I know that he's retiring soon, and there's a ton of speculation about, are they going to replace him with a more liberal person? See, that stuff is the stuff that causes political division, because we're now focusing on the person's political positions rather than the authentic teachings. And more importantly, making sure we're not, number one, being influenced by others. Remember, Cardinal Dolan didn't even know who Charlie Kirk was, and he did his own research. These nuns knew exactly who Charlie Kirk was because these particular nuns are generally more left-leaning. And I know that because I have worked with some of those nuns. I mean, their mother house is based within the Archdiocese of Baltimore in an area called Emmitsburg, Maryland. And I actually took a group of people there on a pilgrimage just very recently. And what's interesting is that these nuns might have more liberal, left-leaning views, but the people who go to the shrine do not agree with them. They are there because the chaplains who go there are pretty traditional, faithful priests. And the people who go there, it's a very traditional, conservative town. The sisters themselves aren't. There might be one or two who, have more traditional leanings, but as an organization, they don't. And what saddens me is that they are dying as a community. There are so few wanting to become those nuns. And why? Because they don't necessarily represent the Catholic faith because of their social, political agenda. And these comments sounded as if they were turning Elizabeth Ann Seton, the foundress of their community, against Cardinal Dolan. But if you actually look at St. Elizabeth Ann Seton's life, she was incredibly disciplined. She was she was welcoming to all immigrants. We get all of that. I mean, Mother Cabrini was the same way. But I guarantee you, they would not take the position of the way that their sisters are now. Because the sisters have, sadly, in my experience, evolved to a more feminine political action committee within the church. They don't necessarily do their charisms anymore. Very few of them actually are working with the poor, and they're doing things like teaching, which is strange because there's actually a set of nuns who were dedicated to the school sisters of Notre Dame who were teachers. But those group of nuns are actually doing like parish work now. It's confusing because we've lost a sense of their charism. I bring this up because as the sisters are not growing in vocations, they're getting older. And as a result, they might not have the capability to do, or the desire to do, or even the energy to debate the issues. I mean, I feel even bad saying this, but I would be very happy to have conversations with the sisters. So if any of you know the sisters, show them this episode. Because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to speak very little, and I'm going to just show you a ton of videos of how many people did not know who Charlie Kirk was. So they could not be influenced by what media was saying. These are people who were not political at all. But then they did their own research, including this man, who I think could respond to the sisters quite well. And hopefully the sisters would be willing to listen to someone like him rather than AOC or this Association of U.S. Catholic Priests man, talking about Kirk from, again, a political point of view. Biased and definitely illogically argued, and incredibly fallacious. But here is a rebuttal, and I don't even need to say anything. Check this out.
I said it on Instagram, so I gotta say it on TikTok. I done got called a coon because I don't see what these so-called Christians who idolize their blackness see when it comes to Charlie Kirk. I don't see the racism. I don't see the hate speech. I don't see none of that. In fact, I see the total opposite. Love rejoices in the truth. That man shared nothing but the truth, biblically and just politically, or just the worldview of everything, even when it comes to our ethnicity as black people and our culture as black people. So if you need to just block me, if you want to call me a coon, call me a coon. You want to call me a room, call me a room. You want to call me boom, call me boom. I don't give a damn. But Charlie Kirk was not racist.
That's one example. What would the sister say to this young man? I wonder. But follow up, what would the sister say to this other man?
To all my black brothers and sisters, let me explain to you what it looks like and sounds like when you say things like Charlie Kirk is racist to a common sense person. It immediately gives off the impression that you're unintelligent, because it takes 8th grade level research to go a step further after seeing a clip or a post where it looks like Charlie Kirk may have said something racist to find the full context of what he actually said. Or it just makes you look ignorant. And this is because there's a lot of black people who are very smart and very intelligent that watch the full context of things that Charlie has said and then still just choose to say he's racist anyway. And that is very ignorant, because essentially you're just choosing to side with people who share your beliefs against your better judgment. And if you're in that camp, it's actually very selfish to knowingly push propaganda, because now you're misleading other black people who may not go do the research, and you're robbing them of the enlightenment surrounding Charlie Kirk's cause. That is why, as a black man, I feel obligated to speak the truth, because there's other black people who have intentionally misled us for years and landed us in the ideological position that we're in now.
That kind of is pretty impressive, says a lot. And I think what I found impressive about this young man's assessment is that he admits that a lot of people who have been speaking out about Charlie Kirk are now inviting others to do their own research. I hope that the sisters would be able to do the same, because I do think that many of them aren't aware of how the internet can kind of feed you lies. And if you continue to just believe them because you want to, and then are presented with information like this and yet refuse to believe it, then they are doing a great disservice to not only the people they're called to serve, but they're doing a great disservice to themselves. I say it quite often. Nobody wants to admit that they're wrong. Nobody wants that, because before you realize that you're wrong, you actually feel really good about yourself. But as soon as you realize that you're wrong, then you feel terrible. And I do think that to some degree, the group of sisters, all of whom are very much aging, it's an aged population indeed, they struggle to keep up with a lot of technology. So they don't realize that maybe the technology is taking advantage of their state in life. And I've seen that happen quite a bit. But perhaps, as this young man pointed out, maybe these sisters do know that there was more of a context and choose not to believe it. That, to me, is dangerous. But guess what? There's still more on this. People who will basically say that Dolan is right. The sisters, they are not correct on the assessment about Charlie Kirk, including this guy.
Charlie Kirk. I came across his page last year, and the first time I saw some clips from Charlie Kirk, I'm not gonna lie, I rolled my eyes. I was a little annoyed. I was like, who's this young, hothead white dude trying to piss people off, asking them random questions? But this year, 2025, was the first time I actually started following him. I started following him top of this year on TikTok and on Instagram. And I can honestly say every single time I would listen to him, I would feel boldness rise in me. I can actually feel faith rise in me. I was very impressed by this guy who stood up for what he believed. And you know what's funny is so many Christians are saying that Charlie Kirk is not a Christian. Well, first of all, how many people have you led to Christ? We saw this week alone that hundreds, millions of people across the nation gathered not to riot, but to worship. People that would have never stepped foot in church have come to know who Jesus Christ is because of the life of Charlie Kirk. I am a witness to tell you that I have been impacted by Charlie Kirk's life. Some people are calling him racist, nationalist, fascist, bigot, white supreme. First of all, you don't know what half of that stuff even means. I'm here to testify and witness to tell you that Charlie Kirk has impacted my life this year because of following him. He has allowed me to feel this boldness to stand up for what I believe. And all year long, every single time I listen to Charlie, it just lifts me up. And some people are out there like they're slandering his name and you don't even have firsthand experience. Matter of fact, you're just regurgitating stuff that you heard people. You don't even know what fascist even means. Just saying random stuff because we live in a clip culture. You see 7 seconds out of context. For me as a preacher, I really do not hope people would take clips out of context. But you know what? It happens. And I can testify and witness. I wish somebody, first of all, even try to come for me, because the thing is, I'm not regurgitating somebody else's experience. I can testify and tell you that Charlie Kirk has impacted my life. And to see a widow forgive someone who killed their spouse, it's crazy. Man, when other people die, other people say, yo, I would never forgive that guy. But to know that we serve a savior, people who truly have Jesus in their heart can forgive and love. My heart goes out to Erica Kirk, goes out to the family, goes out to those kiddos. But honestly, man, I am just encouraged by the life of Charlie Kirk. Hope you can be too, please.
So, sisters, what would you say to this black man who was encouraged by Charlie Kirk? Would you call him a racist? You see, I think that's one of the big struggles that I have, is that all I'm trying to do is present the two opposing viewpoints here. Cardinal Dolan said this. The sisters say this. Who's right? It requires us to make our own decisions, but we have to ask, are decisions influenced by other people? And are we willing to do our own research? I just don't think that that always happens. So I could actually show you even more clips, but I'm not going to, because I think we have all that we need. But sometimes you need to hear it from the man himself. And so this is why I want to just simply end these little video vignettes with the words of Charlie Kirk himself and what he said particularly about race.
Find a different solution for both parties.
I have a great solution. Stop talking about race all the time. Race doesn't mean anything.
I think
Because I look at you not as a black guy, but as a human being made in the image of God, and I want to know what you bring to the table. Are you good at the job? Are you better than your competitor? Because let me just pause for a second. I just want you to hear out what we believe. Is that when you talk about race all the time, you start to resegregate society based on tribes, and you lose this idea of e pluribus unum, all made in the image of God, out of many one. And yes, we have made many mistakes in our past, but we were getting closer as a country in my childhood as being not obsessed with race. We've become more race obsessed over the last 10 years, especially the last 5 years, which is why we're seeing the anti-DEI movement, which actually ends up hurting people of color more than previously. And I guess the biggest question, though, is that why should race matter at all? Shouldn't we just de-emphasize it?
Shouldn't we de-emphasize race? I don't hear racism in this. I hear a man who's just simply saying, I don't want to look at how you look. I want to look at who you are and what you can do, your capabilities and your character, your virtue, your strengths. Let's see that before you try to put in front of me a color. Because if that's the case, even for me, I'm a Filipino guy. Filipino national. And I'm speaking primarily to a lot of races, a lot of different cultures. But I hope that Filipinos aren't listening to me just because I'm Filipino. I hope they're listening to me because I'm trying to provide a balanced Catholic perspective. I hope white people aren't listening to me because they feel sorry for me because I'm not white. I hope they're listening to me because I make sense. that I'm trying to help us as Catholics. Again, I'm talking about the stuff that everyone is talking about. Dolan, one of the highest figures in the Catholic Church in the United States and in the world, and then the sisters. Now, Dolan never responded back, at least to the point of when I'm recording this episode. But for the sisters to do that, to me, it was really a bruta figura. It was ugly. And it really showed either their desire to perpetuate division or their ignorance in what really is going on. Because I just gave you example after example of people who didn't know Kirk well, but they did their research and they actually listened, not with judgment or with prejudice. And for that reason, if I were to make an evaluation, I personally, and I'm entitled to have a personal opinion, I'm entitled to that, I would personally say that Cardinal Dolan's assessment on Charlie Kirk's life is more honest and accurate than how the sisters, religious nuns, portrayed him. But I can also say that God blesses the fruits of that faithfulness. Under Cardinal Dolan, the church grew. Under the way the sisters currently, the Daughters of Charity, are managing their religious community, they're not growing. And so you can decide, and you decide based on the fruits of that spirit. I hope that this gives you something to think about, something to pray about. Let me know your thoughts and your comments. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, and leave me your comments. It helps us to overcome the algorithms. And always, please consider supporting us on patreon.com/thefatherleo show so that we can continue to dish out faith, culture, and commentary, and continued prayers for all of the faithful departed. I know that this is already a couple weeks after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, but his life and death has impacted the world even weeks after. But again, no riots in the streets, but just more prayers, and actually more people coming to church. So God bless him. May his soul and the souls of all the faithful departed, through the mercy of God, rest in peace. God bless you, and stay hungry for God.